Right, hello, good afternoon. Can everyone hear me okay? If not, there's not a lot I can do about it. Welcome to our discussion of mobile design challenges and some possible solutions to it. This session is being brought to you by Chartered Institute of Marketing, so I'm going to quickly cycle through a couple of slides that I guess are their bona fides and tell you all about the good things that they do. There's a piece of paper on your chair, that also mentions all the qualifications and courses that they offer in mobile marketing, but I guess we'll bypass that and we'll carry on to the main part of today. My name's Tim, good afternoon, thanks for coming down. The slides will be made available on Twitter, at Tom Fidgeon on Twitter. I will PDF the slides and put them up, so you don't feel as if you have to take tons of notes. We're going to talk about today are some of the main design challenges associated with mobile devices, particularly smartphones, because for various reasons smartphones are significantly more challenging than tablet PCs. We can perhaps talk about that in a bit more detail. Because we're in the email and mobile theatre, I've felt obligated to have a quick couple of slides on email on phones, but thereafter we really are going into the design and the usability of it. So let's go straight in. So there's all sorts of data at the moment that is suggesting, rather unsurprisingly, that a lot of emails are opened on mobile devices. Who would have guessed it? But apparently someone needed to do some research to prove it, and they have done so. And at the moment, the numbers doing the rounds are about 20%. Whether or not that number is correct doesn't matter. I think from our own intuition we can accept a lot of emails get opened on mobile. Equally, you should check your own data, check your own data if you are sending out emails, to find out what's being opened on different types of devices. The important thing from our perspective, and this is the last time I'll explicitly reference email, is that most people don't bother, if they receive an email on their mobile device and it's not optimized, to then keep it and check it later on a desktop device, because we haven't got that man available free time, life's too short, and we've got cosmopolitan sexy lives to lead. What we do instead is close it and forget about it or delete it and get on with the rest of our day. So therefore, if you are involved in email marketing, one would imagine it would be highly in your favor and in your interests to make sure you have a mobile-friendly, optimized version of your email. Otherwise, people will just close and delete it, because looking at it on a small screen would be an utter nightmare. So that's the email preamble out of the way. Now we can talk about one of the dominant design challenges of designing for mobile devices, particularly smartphones, internet-enabled phones, mini tablets, all that sort of thing, which is screen space, to point out the blindingly obvious. Therefore, in mobile design, we tend to favor single-column designs, whether it's a web page or an email, doesn't matter, simply because two columns in that smaller device space, screen display, simply doesn't work. We also prioritize key content and functionality. So on a desktop site, we have lots of available real estate to promote lots of news stories, lots of products, lots of stuff, because we've got lots of space. On a mobile, we've got a far smaller window on the world. Therefore, we have to be far more deliberate in order to say, okay, what are the four most important things someone wants from our site or on the email on a mobile device? We have to prioritize those, and everything else has to be pushed down. This is one argument against what could be considered the pure definition of responsive design, where the only thing changes is the layout, but everything stays. There's an argument to be had that everything can't really stay, because the things that will work on a big screen may not necessarily work on a small screen, because you just haven't got the amount of real estate. Images. If you have an image that has a lot of fine detail in it, as soon as you shrink that image down, it's not going to make any sense. It's not going to be differentiable because of the resolution, because of people's eyesight. Therefore, what one would tend to do is have simpler, cropped versions of an image that communicate the key value of it. But that would work fine on a desktop. This works fine on a mobile for the reasons that we just discussed. And expandable navigation. Everyone knows on a desktop that at least the global navigation is pretty much always there, always open. On a mobile device, typically, if you think of the BBC or some site like that, one would typically expect to see some interface element in the top right-hand side, which when tapped or clicked would then open and give you access to the menu items. So all of these things are particular and deliberately employed to cope with the small screen space of a particularly a smartphone, as we were talking about. Also, something that's quite interesting to observe is the amount of design elements that are still used on mobile that are relics of the desktop past, in inverted commas. The desktop past, with your desktop hat on, you need a big search box because someone's going to be typing directly into the search box and they want to be able to see their entire search query. Hence the idea of a 25-character search box. That's where that guideline comes from. On a mobile device, one could argue, all you need to do is use the visual signal, this is a search box, because as soon as you start inputting data on it, the keyboard comes up and there's a different dialogue there. So you don't actually need to waste, in inverted commas, all of that space unless you're using that space to visually signal you can do a search here. But functionally, that space is not actually necessary. Content comprehension. This is about your copywriting. It's a bit of a hobby horse of mine about the atrocious level of copywriting online. But that's probably for a different day. I'll just rein myself in on that one. So, studies have been made, as studies will be made, and it's been found that reading and understanding material is 100%, or put it slightly less scientifically, twice as more difficult on a phone as it is on a regular sized screen. The reason for that is, of course, because on a smartphone you have a smaller window on the world, therefore you have to scroll more in order to get access to anything. When you're scrolling, you're not reading and you're distracted and you're potentially forgetting what you just read. And also, of course, the very fact that you have that small window means that you have to work harder to keep it in your working memory about the narrative, about the points that are being made. You have to do more mental stitching yourself to put the message together, whereas if you have a large screen, that's not so much the case. And this study, what they did was they asked people to read material, and then afterwards they asked them questions about it to prove whether or not they'd understood it and whether or not they'd remembered it. And as I say, it was found that the performance dropped off rapidly on a small screen device. So therefore, if we are writing content for mobile, or we're writing one set of content and we know it's going to be on our desktop and on our mobile sites, we need to make sure it's super concise. We also need to make sure it's scannable, so that it's using things like headings, lists, bold, to make our key messages stand out. At this point in the game, if anyone's doing online copywriting and it looks even vaguely like a school essay, you probably deserve to be put up against a wall. It should look far more like a PowerPoint presentation with headings and bullets and bold, where things stand out and you are guiding someone's eye, rather than relying on them reading it properly like a school essay or a business report. But as I say, it's a hobby horse of mine. I may as well park it. And the idea of progressive disclosure, where you may not necessarily want to give all the information on a topic all at once on a mobile device, because it's small screen, more scrolling, things we just talked about. You might instead have progressive disclosure, which is a fancy way of saying you kind of have a table of contents or a series of links, and you let people decide which one to expand or which one to navigate away to, rather than forcing them to read a very long, big page. So that's content comprehension. You may not realize it, but I could have talked to you all day about online copywriting, and indeed I do, but that would cost you about 500 quid, so this is free, so let's not do that. Glare, reflections, and poor lighting. A rather inconvenient truth of mobile devices is, of course, that they are going to be viewed in non-optimal viewing environments, which is a posh way of saying outdoors and on the move. So you will not have office lighting, you will not have a stable environment. Therefore, this is why you see people craning in doorways on a summer afternoon trying to find shadow so they can actually read something that's appeared on their phone because of the glare and the reflection and all of that stuff. So what we need to do is make sure that our designs are using contrast in a very intelligent way, color in a very intelligent way, so that things are legible and your message is even legible on the screen. So ways to do that are your choice of font, the size of the font, and the contrast that you are using, the color scheme. As I say, these slides are going to be available if you're kind enough to follow me on Twitter, so don't feel compelled to make too many notes. Font, typically Arial, Verdana, and the one I can't pronounce, are sans serif fonts. And serifs are, I assume, French for squiggly bit, or something similar. And not to get too technical on you, but squiggly bits are difficult to comprehend, because as you're reading, it complicates the shape of the letter, therefore your eye and your brain have a tiny bit more work to do to figure out what the letter is. If we eliminate the squiggly bits, to give them their technical term, if we eliminate the squiggly bits, you then have a simpler, basic shape of each letter, which when someone is scanning or reading at speed in a non-optimal viewing environment, there is actually benefits to that. So one would use that sort of a font. Size, you would normally seek to default to about 12 or 13 point as a recommendation in terms of font size, but you would also, of course, have a control to change text size on every page of the site, either at the top or at the bottom. I don't know about you, but my parents recently got Kindles, and if you ever look over their shoulder and see the size of type on your parents' Kindle, it is truly frightening. It makes you wonder, how do these people not walk into doorways or something? It's just, how do they function on a day-to-day basis with eyesight that bad? So if you think about that, and indeed the mobile devices are penetrating all sectors of society, allowing people to make writing bigger is probably a good idea. Sorry, I'm so old school, I keep expecting to have to press this rather than do this. Contrast. I think this is John Lewis. They may have undergone a redesign since then, but as a general rule, on a small screen, which we know is going to be mobile and is going to be viewed in suboptimal viewing environments, it might not be the best idea to have your color scheme be dark grey on light grey. You might want to reconsider that, Mr. John Lewis. You might instead try to have dark text on a light background, which since time immemorial everyone knows is the best color scheme for most people in terms of contrast. I'm all for branding and polished steel and Appleness and all that sort of stuff, but at some point your message has to actually get through to people, and if the design is compromising that, I would say we might have a slight rebalancing of priorities to do. One would also, of course, line anyone up against a wall who ever thought about putting text on a pattern background. Because you've got the text, you've got the pattern, that the two conflict, I can't resolve between them, so my natural reaction is just to ignore the whole thing and either hit the back button or just scroll past it. Because again, my life's too short and I've got interesting, sexy things to go and do, supposedly. Download speeds. Now this is one that's often not taken seriously enough, because we all think we're living in the future, whereas of course we're not. Well, we are, relatively speaking, but you know what I'm saying. So download speeds. The interesting thing about tablet PC use, and there's probably a slide in here that I'm preempting myself. The interesting thing about tablet PC use is that approximately 70% of use tends to be at home, because they're a bit too big and clunky, frankly, to be carrying around, although I see a couple of you using them to take notes. But typically, it's in front of the TV, second screen activity, and you've got your home Wi-Fi network connected. Therefore, download speed is not an issue because you've basically got, a connection faster than God. However, if you are a mobile device, a smartphone, then all of a sudden bandwidth does become an issue because you're relying on rubbish 3G connectivity, which studies have shown at the moment there's an average web page download speed of about 8 seconds. And I think I really am preempting myself now. There we go. About 8 seconds for a basic web page, which is rubbish. And even in London, in this glorious metropolis that we call home, if you try and browse the internet on a smartphone, it's still epically slow, painful, and just inconvenient. And we're supposed to be like a major capital country in the world. And as we all know, 4G is supposed to be coming. But when, where, how much it will cost, who knows? Do you really want to base your entire design on the hope that 4G is coming? I would suggest not. I think you're probably playing quite a high-risk game there. So, unfortunate though it may be, you probably need to get your 1999 head back on, old school, and start thinking about page weight, images, alt tags, all that sort of malarkey that we thought we'd left behind in the past, simply because on mobile it really does matter, which is yet another reason perhaps why responsive design, in its purest incarnation of everything has to stay, only the layout changes, might not necessarily work, because if I'm on a desktop, you, the site owner, have far more bandwidth and screen size to play with. On the smartphone, of course, at the moment, much less so. So therefore, you may wish to do different things, different messaging, different images, all that sort of stuff. And just as, just to show the problems that it causes, connection speed is the main thing people complain about on mobile devices. So this is how important it is in your design to bear this in mind and build it in, get quick downloads built in. Conversion rates increase if you speed a page up to 2 seconds from 8 seconds, and abandonment falls significantly, again, if you speed things up. And we've seen this before in terms of the average download speed. Even if, and this is the thing about statistics, which I'm sure you will know, don't trust them. Don't trust statistics. I always go, okay, 8 seconds. Let's assume it's 4 seconds. Let's say it's twice as good as they say it is, which probably isn't, but let's just say it is. 4 seconds is still rubbish. 4 seconds is still too long to wait, particularly when all the research suggests that people like 1 second or less. That's what is required for someone to experience an interaction as fluid, comfortable, pleasant, all that good stuff. So that's what we should be aiming for. Therefore, there's an argument for an optimized mobile site, not only from a design and usability perspective, but also from a download perspective. So you immediately redirect someone to that site before any of the main site has loaded. But that does not preclude you or stop you from still linking to the full site if someone wants to, and of course vice versa. It makes sense that if you're linking to the full from the mobile, then you do the other way around as well. Content delivery networks are a way in which you can cache data locally, either at a country or a city level, and therefore, of course, the data has less distance to travel, and hopefully will download that much more quickly. If you ask me an in-depth, detailed question about content delivery networks, I will give you a blank stare. I know they exist. I know they're probably a good idea, but I haven't got a PhD in whatever I need a PhD in to actually understand the technical side of things. That's why we have technical people like Sam back there doing the complicated stuff while we do all the sexy, bells and whistles stuff. And apps, of course. At this point in the game, there is a conversation to be had. Do we really need apps anymore? What's the distinguishing characteristic of an app when websites have become so much better at accessing the phone's hardware? Still, the unique characteristic of an app is that it does allow offline browsing. So therefore, once an app is downloaded and you are offline, you can still have very, very quick access to information. You can go between screens. So there is a case for, if you do have heavy content, then maybe you just stick it in an app, let them download it over time while they're doing something else, and then they can browse at their leisure at a later date. Something to think about. And of course, if you've ever been in a business meeting, as I have, where someone said, we have to have an app, has anyone got any ideas? These people deserve to be put up against a wall. Minimize page items. We're in 1999 mode, remember. So images have to justify their existence in terms of their number and their size. Are they doing anything useful? A picture of a smiling baby on his mother's lap may be doing a very valuable branding job, therefore it stays. Or it may just be a random image that we put there because we had nothing better to do with our time, in which case it goes. I'm not saying no images, but just be very careful about the use of them and make them justify their existence. Of course, we use alt tags. We use them for search engines, we use them for accessibility, we use them for good karma, and we also use them for download speeds. And if you're waiting for information to download, to update, to refresh, whatever the case may be, you can always have while you wait type information. To let them know the site isn't broken, something's happening, a circle's going round, it's animated, these messages have to be animated, but it's also an opportunity to present textual marketing messages or something along those lines, instructional text, special offers, whatever the case may be. So the studies suggest that mobile audiences accessing information or websites on mobile devices tend to be, surprise, surprise, focused on time-sensitive tasks. So they're looking for dynamically updating information, news, traffic reports, weather, all that sort of malarkey, or location-sensitive information, such as maps, opening hours, directions, bus timetables, whatever the case may be. So if you have that sort of content associated with your organization, it would probably make a lot of sense to prioritize it far more on the mobile version of your site than you perhaps would on your desktop. So if you're local county council, the information that 9 out of 10 schools are having a snow day, or whatever the case may be, would be one of the most important things on your homepage, whereas it might not have been as prominent in terms of pure percentage of screen size on your desktop site. So we're now in the second half of the presentation, which is why I'm rather nervously checking the time, I'll be honest with you. But the good news is these slides are available if you follow me on Twitter. See, quid pro quo. You could call it bribery, but that's because it's exactly what it is. Lack of hover state. Desktop land, you don't necessarily have to make things look all that interactive. This is an important one. You don't have to make things look all that interactive because you've got this lovely thing called the cursor. And if you pass the cursor over something and it changes shape, most people know magic's going to happen. You're going to do stuff. However, you'd be really surprised how important that is, because when it's taken away, and the only clue to whether or not something's interactive or tappable or clickable is whether or not it looks tappable. In user media testing sessions, people end up tapping things just all around the screen trying to find something that is interactive. So, 1999 all over again, buttons with drop shadow. Turns out drop shadow is quite a good idea in some instances because it lets you know you can push stuff, you can depress it. Equally, putting an arrow next to stuff lets you know, oh, I'm going to go somewhere here. Those sorts of simple visual signifiers that this is interactive. And of course, if you're not making your link text blue and bold at this point, you should probably hide yourself in a room or something. Put a wet towel on your face and just think about your life. All of the perceived targets should be interactive. So if a group of information is perceived as a whole by the audience, either because it's the same shape, it's the same color, it's in the same place, it's in a box, then the whole thing should be tappable rather than just one tiny bit of it that you in your perverse sense of humor have decided to make tappable. So here is an exercise that we're not going to do because we're running out of time and this isn't a full-on training session, but take it from me that if you sit people down and ask them to predict what isn't tappable on this screen, almost everyone gets at least one thing wrong. And by wrong, I don't mean you got it wrong. I mean the designers got it wrong and did not sufficiently communicate what is and isn't tappable. Just as an example, and I don't want to geek out too much on this, if that is blue and not tappable, that is blue and tappable, you are using blue in a way that I frankly do not understand. colors should be used to communicate something. Either the information is the same, the functionality is the same, something like that. Touch targets, we'll do this quite quickly. For reasons that should be painfully obvious to everybody, bigger targets are easier to notice and tap. And the guideline is, and people aren't happy if you have too smaller touch targets, the guideline is 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter is the ideal size. Of course, you can go away from that, but beware, the further away you do go from that, the more you are introducing potential problems for the audience. And finally, just quickly, don't rely on pixel size, because rather helpfully, amongst all the thousands of mobile devices out there, different manufacturers and different models from the same manufacturer have different pixel sizes. So defining something by pixel size is a complete waste of time. You may as well just say 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter, or whatever size you decide that you're comfortable with. So here we have some screenshots from adventures with me and my fat fingers, and we see that I could not tap that without tapping that by mistake. These text links are far too close together. Someone's just had a complete meltdown there. And even Tesco's, God bless them, plus, minus, add, all very close together. Unless you've got the fingers of a 12-year-old, you're going to struggle, frankly. So these things are worth considering at the very least. And I had trouble with all of those interfaces, and I'm not even as fat as my dad yet. So when I get that big, we're going to have real trouble. Orientation changes. I've got 8 minutes left. I'm feeling okay about this. Orientation changes. That's an orientation change. I know we all know what that is. Portrait, landscape, switch it, fluid design, all that good stuff. So different layout for each orientation makes a lot of sense. The same content and functionality should be present in both orientations. If you have to switch the device to get access to something, like a graph or a spreadsheet, tell them. Make it explicitly obvious that that is indeed the case. Don't just assume someone's going to magically guess it. And consistent scrolling. So if you're scrolling vertically in one orientation, you're scrolling vertically in the other orientation, because it's the same page. So conceptually, for the audience, that makes the most sense. Where do we locate ourselves when we switch from this orientation to that orientation? Well, if you're working in the circus and you happen to be a mind reader, then you can feel free, take a stab. If you're not working in the circus and you're not a mind reader, I would strongly suggest the beginning of the page at the time of the orientation change is the only bit of the page you are 100% confident that they might well have seen. That it's not going to completely freak them out if they see the top of the page again. If, however, you say, well, let's do it halfway, because I'm a mind reader and I think people generally do it halfway through, and they weren't halfway through, you will completely disorientate them, otherwise known as freaking them out. So therefore, the top edge should remain consistent between orientations, otherwise you're just asking for trouble. And hopefully I'm just talking through all these challenges, mobile's not easy. And frankly, people can't even design proper websites on desktop yet. Let's be honest, they can't. Everyone's redesigning every 5 years or 3 years. So on mobile, if you don't follow the best practice as much as you can, you've got absolutely no chance. Provide location markers within your content, consistently positioned and memorable, things like headings, paragraph breaks, maybe even in extremis an image or two, so that there's some sort of visual geography of the page that will help someone locate themselves rather than just a wall of text that makes it very difficult. And don't auto-scroll to the top of the page. Don't go out of my way to give Tesco a kicking. It just happens to be really easy. So here I am, and I'm looking at, because I'm, as you can tell from my svelte figure, I'm obviously into these sorts of data sheets and nutrition facts. And I was there, and I said, well, that doesn't work. That's ugly. So let's change orientation. What happens? It auto-scrolls me to the top of the page for a reason I'm not entirely sure of. Probably because it was too expensive to not do it or something. I've got no idea. Gestures and data input, 6 minutes. I'll stick around behind if there is anyone who wants to have a chat about anything. Gestures. The important thing is that whenever you require someone to do something with a gesture, a tap, a scroll, a flick, whatever the case may be, there should always be some sort of visual indicator on the screen that is what is expected. Preferably, that indicator would also itself be tappable. So if we have a look, quick look here, for instance, this was on the next site a while ago. I'm not sure if it still works like this, but if you are providing a carousel of images and you have a message that says swipe to see more images, tap to zoom, and that message disappears after a couple of seconds, you're really not living in Hotel California. I don't know what you're thinking. It's absolutely mental. What you want is that sort of thing. Now, obviously, I did that in PowerPoint, so I'm not saying it's the best designed in the world. It's not the most attractive in the world. But you want those sorts of controls to let me know I can swipe. If, for any reason, I'm my dad and I don't know swiping has yet entered the universe, I can then tap that and see the next one on. Equally here, zoom. I tap that, and then I zoom in. So there should always be, take you back a couple of ones, visual cues and tap alternatives when you are requiring gesture interface, gesture interaction, excuse me. And for repetitive tasks, such as a very large carousel, then you would really want tap alternatives, because a tap is less effort than continually having to do this, which after you've owned a phone for a couple of weeks, the novelty of doing this all day kind of goes away, and it just becomes a bit of a pain. Okay, great stuff. Data input, last couple of slides, and I'll have hit my time mark, which is at this point I'm really concerned about. So, data input. Unless you're 10 years old and hopped up on Coca-Cola, touchscreen typing, such as sending a text message, is actually one of the more difficult things you're going to do with your day, just because, fat fingers, clumsiness, all that sort of thing. Typing from a regular keyboard is a lot quicker, easier, more reliable. It's a more accurate task. So someone, because common sense isn't enough, you have to actually have data to convince people of these things. Someone at a university actually did a study and said that for keyboards of equivalent size, just making it a touch screen as opposed to a regular tapping keyboard slows you down 40%. Just because you haven't got that haptic touch feedback of something getting pressed down, and yeah, I'm definitely doing something properly, because the touch screen is, it's like a not very good conversation partner. So we've established touchscreen itself makes typing a bit of a git. On top of that, we of course know that the keyboard on a phone is going to be even smaller than that of a tablet. Therefore, the problem is going to be even more pronounced. Therefore, we want to minimize data input as much as possible. The ways that we do that are, wherever possible, you don't require them to put anything in at all. You do the work for them. GPS to get their location rather than forcing them to put in their postcode. Intelligent defaults, so that you default to today someone's location, whatever it is that you can reasonably think is an intelligent default. Encourage bookmarks, so they don't even have to input your URL, because even that's a pain, or inputting a search phrase, so that you've got some real estate on their home screen as well, of course. Click to call is an obvious one, so that they don't have to write it down and then go back into, it's just all that nightmare. Nice, easy ways. So here, search current location based on the phone's GPS. Here it defaults to the time in the day. And here, of course, it encourages you, when you arrive, to add an icon on your home screen so that you don't have to search for them or input their URL next time. Other ways that we can support data input, of course, 2 minutes left. Then we all self-destruct or something. I don't know quite what happens at that point. Maybe there'll be a coach and horse to take me somewhere interesting. So HTML5 offers different virtual keyboards. So if you're asking people for their email address, you can have the email keyboard, which already has the @ If you're asking someone to input a number, then of course there's the number keyboard, and all these sorts of different keyboards are available to you just to make data input that little bit easier. Also, auto-suggest, save data, and these interface elements. So auto-suggest, based on either my recent purchasing behavior, I go from London to Manchester a lot, or the fact that I'm in London, so just your recent behavior based on cookies. Here, the predictive function, so that I can select the Star Wars, by the way, just to give a geek reference. So predictive behavior, so I don't have to even finish the typing, becomes much more valuable here, as it does here in the mobile environment. So this is all doable on desktop as well, but it becomes particularly helpful on mobile. These are some guidelines on what error messages should do. I'm pretty sure we all know that error messages should tell you there's a problem, tell you what the problem is, tell you where the problem is, and then suggest a solution. Of course, also critically, you want to preserve user input. So you don't want to auto-clear the field or anything like that, perhaps. You may consider keeping user input and allowing someone to edit it. So here we see a suggestion. Yes, I did mean Dortmund. Thank you very much. Yes, I mistyped Star Wars. Yes, I did mean Star Wars. Fantastic. I'm not suggesting that's why HMV went out of business. But if you mistype Willy Wonka by one character and you get absolutely nothing back, then you're not really helping me buy stuff. But I suggest they had bigger issues, frankly. But, if not, they're the first business to go out of business for mobile usability. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Hopefully you found it useful. If not, at least thank you for not throwing things at me. If you follow me on Twitter, @Tom Fidgeon, I will indeed be tweeting the slides, so you can get those for free. I don't even know if we have any time for questions. I don't think we do. Do we?